The first episode of Stranger Things Season 3 is titled, Suzie, Do You Copy? The episode opens with a chilling scene set in a clandestine Russian laboratory, where Russian scientists are engrossed in experiments involving the Upside Down, unveiling a new, ominous threat. Supervised by a Russian general, a specially engineered machine emits a high-intensity beam of energy, attempting to breach the entrance to the Upside Down within an underground Russian facility. Despite nearly succeeding in prying open the entrance, it abruptly seals shut again. In a swift and ruthless move, the general's bodyguard executes the lead scientist, leaving the second in command with a strict ultimatum: complete the project within a year. With this ominous decree, the general exits the scene in a storm of urgency. 1 year after the strange events at the Russian facility, Eleven and Mike are making out in her room amidst loud music, while Hopper casually watches TV nearby. As Hopper begins to grow suspicious, he leans back in his chair, catching a glimpse of them kissing, prompting him to interject with a playful, "Hey!" However, before he can fully react, Eleven swiftly shuts the door on him. Upon Hopper's subsequent attempt to investigate further by opening the door, both Eleven and Mike hastily grab books, feigning innocence as they pretend to be engrossed in reading, an action that visibly irks Hopper. For the kids, life in Hawkins appears to be normal for once. Mike joins Lucas, Max, and Will outside the recently inaugurated Starcourt Mall, relishing the joys of summer vacation. Meanwhile, a new character named Robin is introduced as Steve's co-worker at the mall's ice cream parlor, Scoops Ahoy. Steve graciously grants the kids access to the shop and leads them through a concealed backdoor entrance that seamlessly opens into the movie theater. Unexpectedly, however, a blackout ensues within the confines of the Starcourt Mall, swiftly extending its reach throughout the entire town. Meanwhile, in a seemingly deserted warehouse, a strange phenomenon unfolds as rats display inexplicable behavior, spontaneously combusting, while a monstrous entity manifests itself in the form of a tornado. Sensing a foreboding presence, Will experiences a chilling sensation as he receives a vision from the Upside Down, revealing the resurgence of the shadow monster. Suddenly snapped back to reality by Mike's inquiry, Will is brought back to the present moment, shaken by the encounter. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jonathan have taken on intern roles at the local newspaper. Nancy finds herself relegated to menial tasks, solely because of her gender. Even when she presents a promising story idea, a superior dismissively tasks her with trivial matters, like solving the mystery of the missing mustard on his hamburger. The condescending remark triggers laughter among her colleagues, leaving Nancy no choice but to exit the room, feeling belittled and frustrated. After spending a month away at camp, Dustin returns home eager to reconnect with his friends. He excitedly attempts to reach them through his walkie-talkie as soon as he's within range, but receives no response. Disheartened, he sits on his bed, feeling a sense of loneliness. Suddenly, all the robots in his room spring to life, marching into the living room. Intrigued and puzzled, Dustin follows them, only to be taken aback as his friends collectively shout, "Surprise!" welcoming him home. Overwhelmed by the unexpected gesture, Dustin proudly reveals his new acquisition, a long-range radio dubbed Cerebro. Adding to the excitement, he shares news of his new girlfriend Suzie, leaving his friends astounded and delighted. Following this, Hopper arrives at Joyce's workplace in a state of agitation, seeking counsel from her regarding the constant displays of affection between Mike and Eleven. Joyce offers a perspective shift, emphasizing that Mike and Eleven are no longer children, but teenagers navigating their emotions. She warns Hopper against attempting to forcefully intervene, as it may provoke the teenagers to rebel. Instead, Joyce advises Hopper to approach the situation calmly, suggesting he sit down with them to express his feelings openly. This gentle approach resonates with Hopper, leading the burly man to reconsider his initial reaction. Meanwhile, the kids are intrigued by the idea of talking to Suzie. However, Dustin explains that Suzie's family, being Mormon, wouldn't approve of her conversing with boys. Therefore, the only way to contact her is through Cerebro. Since Cerebro requires a height of over 100 meters to function properly, the group must lug the entire structure to a hill of significant elevation. Exhausted but determined, they finally reach the desired height and begin setting up the structure. Yet, when Dustin attempts to reach Suzie through the radio, there's only static silence on the other end, prompting Max and Lucas to doubt Suzie's existence, suspecting her to be a figment of Dustin's imagination. Back at Hopper's place, he is visibly nervous as he prepares to have a serious conversation with Eleven and Mike, armed with a script provided by Joyce. Entering the room where the kids are hanging out, he takes a seat in front of them, attempting to maintain composure. However, when Mike and Eleven start whispering and giggling, it becomes the final straw for Hopper. He abruptly interrupts, informing Mike that his mother called and he needs to return home immediately due to an emergency involving his grandmother. However, as soon as Mike gets into the car, Hopper erupts in anger after Mike labels him as a crazy person for pulling such a stunt. Hopper's demeanor shifts as he begins to behave erratically, declaring that he'll be driving Mike home, but insisting that for the duration of the trip, Mike will listen to him talk. Back at the hill where the kids had set up Cerebro, night falls as Suzie remains unresponsive for an extended period, prompting everyone to depart and leaving Dustin alone. However, he soon hears a voice emanating from his impressive radio. Despite being unable to comprehend the language, it becomes apparent that the voice is speaking in Russian. Unbeknownst to Dustin, the voice is originating from the Soviet underground base, where experiments on the Upside Down are being conducted. Meanwhile, a romance begins to blossom between Mrs. Wheeler and Billy. Billy, having recently secured a job as a lifeguard at the Hawkins community pool, quickly becomes the object of desire for many of the ladies frequenting the pool. He engages in flirtatious behavior with Mrs. Wheeler, inviting her to a nearby motel for what he suggests are swimming lessons. Initially hesitant, Mrs. Wheeler declines, but ultimately succumbs to Billy's charms and agrees to join him. Later that night, Billy sets off for his date with Mrs. Wheeler, rehearsing a few lines in the car while checking himself out in the rearview mirror. However, his plans are abruptly interrupted when something collides with his car, causing a crash that leaves it completely wrecked. Frustrated by the sight of steam billowing from the engine, Billy finds himself stranded, coincidentally, right beside the warehouse where the strange creature had emerged earlier in the form of a tornado. Startled by a voice, Billy calls out into the darkness, only to have something seize his leg and drag him into the warehouse. Descending the stairs into the basement, he finds himself confronted by the ominous presence of the mysterious creature lying in wait. This concludes the first episode of Stranger Things Season 3. The second episode of Stranger Things Season 3 is titled The Mall Rats. The episode kicks off with Billy somehow managing to escape from the monster in the basement, making his way to his car and driving away. Upon reaching a nearby phone booth, he dials 911 for help. However, as the lights flicker ominously in the booth, Billy emerges to find himself in the Upside Down. Surrounded by an approaching army of people in the darkness, Billy shouts out in confusion. To his astonishment, he realizes that the leader of the group bears a striking resemblance to himself. Meanwhile, at Hopper's place, Eleven calls Mike in frustration, questioning his absence. Mike fabricates a lie, claiming that his grandmother's health has deteriorated and she may be nearing death. However, Mike's mother also happens to be on the phone and questions him about his grandmother's condition, prompting Eleven to inquire if Mike is being truthful. Despite Eleven's doubt, Mike insists that friends do not lie. He hastily pretends to receive another call from his mother and abruptly ends the conversation. Elated that his plan succeeded, Hopper visits Joyce at her workplace to thank her for preparing him for the talk with the kids and tells her that he'll take her to dinner someplace nice as a gesture of appreciation for her support. Nancy and Jonathan delve into the peculiar case reported by Mrs. Driscoll, involving bizarre incidents with diseased rats. Upon arriving at her residence, Mrs. Driscoll guides them to her basement, where they discover bags of fertilizer ravaged by rats. Meanwhile, as Mrs. Driscoll manages to trap one of the rats in a cage, it begins to thrash and emit piercing screeches from within its cloth-covered enclosure. Their investigation takes an unexpected turn when they visit the local hospital, where they stumble upon a shocking revelation that shakes their perception of reality. Meanwhile, Hopper is summoned to the mayor's office amidst a backdrop of protesters demonstrating against the Starcourt Mall. Their chants of "Klein's a swine" echo through the air as they gather outside the office. Mayor Klein informs Hopper that the protesters are without a permit and advises him to utilize his authority by flashing his badge to disperse them. With a smug grin, the mayor then gestures for Hopper to leave the office. Back at Mrs. Driscoll's residence, Jonathan attempts to capture images of the rat, but struggles as it refuses to remain still. He soon notices that something is wrong with the rat, as it looks ill. However, Nancy comes downstairs to the basement and tells Jonathan that she's found a solid lead to follow up on, and they quickly make their way out the door. As soon as they leave, the rat seemingly explodes into a goo-like substance before escaping from its cage. Billy returns to the real world from the Upside Down, but he appears markedly different from his former self. The intense sunlight seems to scorch his skin, and he displays clear signs of disorientation and agitation. He notices a dark entity moving within his arm, indicating a profound connection to both worlds, accompanied by disturbing voices echoing in his mind. As he struggles to grapple with his altered state, Heather, a fellow lifeguard, enters the dressing room to check on him, expressing concern for his well-being. Billy, however, interprets her words as a sinister command, prompting him to violently attack and render her unconscious. He then transports her to an abandoned location where the monstrous creature resides. Instructing the girl to remain still, he ominously assures her that it will all soon come to an end, just as the formidable creature begins to approach her. Meanwhile, Eleven and Mike go to Max and Lucas, respectively, for advice on their current relationship status. Mike tells Lucas that he feels pretty bad that he lied to Eleven, and now she's mad at him. Max, on the other hand, tells Eleven that Mike is definitely lying to her and advises her to dump his ass. Lucas suggests to Mike that he should consider buying Eleven a gift to make amends, while Max urges Eleven to prioritize having fun and suggests a trip to the mall, despite Eleven's usual prohibition from going there. Both groups coincidentally converge at the mall, where Eleven and Max enjoy trying on clothes and having a great time, while Lucas, Mike, and Will struggle to find an affordable gift for Eleven. As they reunite outside the mall, Eleven confronts Mike about his habitual lying and decisively tells him, "I dump your ass," surprising Max. They both swiftly catch a departing bus and leave the scene. At Starcourt Mall, Dustin returns and reunites with Steve Henderson, who warmly welcomes him back. Excitedly, Dustin shares with Steve about the clandestine Russian transmission he intercepted on the radio tower, expressing their potential to become true American heroes by solving the mystery. However, despite their efforts, they struggle to decipher even a single word of the Russian message. Meanwhile, Robin, growing weary of serving ice cream, intervenes to correct their approach, explaining that the Russian alphabet differs from the English alphabet. Taking charge of the translation task, Robin sends Steve outside to resume his duties of scooping ice cream. After persevering for a while, Robin and Dustin successfully translate the message from Russian to English, which read, "The week is long, the silver cat feeds, when blue meets yellow in the west." Initially appearing as nonsensical, Robin concurs with Dustin's assessment that it may be a code. Recognizing that the Russians would likely encrypt any secret information, Steve suggests a potential breakthrough. Steve notices that the music accompanying the Russian radio message matches the tune emanating from the horse ride, Indiana Flyer, located in the mall's arcade. Quickly piecing together the clues, they realize that the message did not originate from Russia, but rather from within the Starcourt Mall itself. This concludes the second episode of Stranger Things Season 3.